Hi guys, and welcome back to our channel. As you will notice today, I am sitting on my own and the dog just barked. As you will have noticed today, I am sitting on my own. So a couple of people wanted some planning videos from us, and David and I sat and talked about it, and because I'm kind of the main planner of our trips, we thought it would make sense for me to do these solo because he was worried he'd just be sitting there like a lemon. So with that being said, I'm going to talk to you about planning today. Now, I've decided to go down a slightly different route with the planning video because yesterday I sat down to do some filming and I started talking about how we book our trips, how we plan kind of everything in general, and I kind of felt like I wasn't offering any new information that could be helpful to people. It's something that I've seen so many vloggers do who can probably offer tons more advice than we can, or at least they've already presented the advice in a much better way than we could come up with doing it. So I decided to focus on one specific area that I haven't seen a lot of focus on, which is how we plan our days out in Disney World. So kind of how we decide what parks we're going to on what days, how we decide how many times we're going to go to a certain park, all that type of thing. So hopefully that's a kind of new and interesting take on it for you, and something that you haven't seen too many times before, and might be able to give you some new information to work with. So hopefully that sounds interesting, and we will hop straight into it. The first thing that you kind of have to do is, once you've booked your trip to Florida, you have to decide what parks you want to go to. So some people just do Disney, some people do Universal, some people do Disney and Universal, they might just do Universal. Then they've got all the other parks to consider. You've got Busch Gardens down in Tampa, you've got SeaWorld, you've got Fun Spot, you've got Legoland, you've got all the different water parks like Aquatica. You've got Discovery Cove. There's so much to do. There's all these other places that people don't tend to think of as well, like Wild Florida and Gatorland. So there's so many attractions and places that you can go in Florida now, so it's really good to make a list of the ones that you want to visit, because that's going to be your first step of kind of planning your days. I mean, what I would say is be realistic. If you're going on a trip for a week, there's no point having all 4 Disney parks, 3 Universal parks including Volcano Bay, Busch Gardens and SeaWorld. That's 9 to 10 parks that you're just going to end up absolutely knackered. And the truth of the matter is as well, you want to include a couple of rest days in your plan. So be realistic with your plans as well. So that is my first kind of tip, to just sit down, jot down where you want to go to on your trip and kind of work backwards from there. To help you decide how many days kind of you want to spend in each park, I would have a think about what your priorities are. So for example, on our upcoming May 2019 trip, we kind of talked about what our priorities were. We last went in October 2018, so it's only about 8 months gap between the 2 trips. There hasn't been very many new attractions open, so there's nothing like that we really want to rush to. So what we decided is, my favourite park is Magic Kingdom, David's is Epcot, so we said we want to focus our attention there. Also adding into Epcot, it's the Flower and Garden Festival whilst we're out there, which we've never been to. So we're deciding to kind of prioritise those 2 parks above all the other parks this time. You'll notice when we vlog our trip, we're spending 3 days in Magic Kingdom and 3 days in Epcot, and we're on a 2-week trip, so that's 6 days out of our 14 days. That's almost a whole week just at 2 parks. Now the thing with me and David is, this is our 4th consecutive year traveling to Disney World. We have a really good idea of what parks we like, what parks we don't like, how much time we spend in each park. So we kind of have got this down to a T. We know that we don't spend as much time in Animal Kingdom, so we've got a day and a half there. We know that Hollywood Studios has got a lot of construction going on right now, and we don't always end up spending as much time there and can generally get things done in a day, so we've only got 1.5 days there. So it all works out in that kind of way. If you're new to going to Florida, I would say do your research, kind of get an idea of the parks that you really think you're going to like. If you know you love animals and you know that Animal Kingdom is, you know, going to be your absolute favourite park, then factor in a couple of days for that park. It's just working it like that. You'll speak to so many people who will go, yeah, you need at least this many days in Magic Kingdom, and I mean, I would agree with those people because Magic Kingdom is my favourite, but I know lots of people who aren't the biggest fans of Magic Kingdom. So if you truly don't feel like that's going to be a park that interests you, I'd maybe plan for less days. If you get out there and you're just swept up by the magic and you end up loving Magic Kingdom, you can alter plans, you can change it. So I would really recommend just kind of doing your research, thinking about what parks you really like, what your priorities are going to be. Once again, think about if there's any special events. If you're going in the autumn and fall time, Food and Wine Festival might be on, so that might be another reason to spend more time at Epcot. Parks might not be your priority. You might actually just really want to do lots of shopping, so factor in a couple of days for shopping. On our trips we only do 1 full day of shopping. We pick up things throughout the parks as we go, but we only do 1 day where we go to the outlets and the malls and stuff like that. So if you're a big shopper and you know you want to kind of get in on those American bargains and the outlet bargains, then factor in a few days for that, because it makes sense. Another thing to consider when planning your trip is rest days. So we all understand that excitement when you book a Florida trip and you're like, I want to do something every day, I want to get this and that done. And the reality of the situation is there's so much to do in Florida and within just the parks alone that you're not going to get everything done. So be realistic and factor in a few rest days. Now, we've spoken a little bit about this before. When we do rest days, they're not what a lot of people would consider rest days. Me and David don't like sitting still at all. So on our rest days, we go to a water park for half a day and then maybe mosey around Disney Springs. Or we might do half a day in a water park and then do the evening at Magic Kingdom or the evening at Universal, vice versa. So definitely plan rest days that work for you. However, if you know you've got young kids who are going to get really tired and grouchy in the heat and all the kind of long days, make sure to factor in those rest days, because Florida can be really hard on your feet, on your eyes in terms of tiredness, and the last thing you want to do is come home from a trip tireder than you were when you left the UK. So at the end of the day, it's a holiday and you want to feel rested, so don't overdo it. So factor in those rest days as well. They'll really come in handy and they'll be a good chance for you to rejuvenate. And another good tip for a rest day is if you don't want to sit still, you can also do some resort hopping. There's so many fun hotels around Universal, Disney, Florida in general. Another thing we look at when planning our days is the park hours and the extra magic hours. Now, if you're staying on site at Disney, you are entitled to the extra magic hours. If you're staying on site, they're a really good thing to take advantage of. But something to keep in mind is that sometimes parks can be busier on the days that they have extra magic hours. So if you want to avoid crowds, sometimes it's best to avoid them. Now this year we're staying off site, so we've tried to kind of plan our days around the times when there's not extra magic hours, because we know a lot of the resort guests will be in the parks on those days. So we'll be in parks that don't have extra magic hours for the most part. That being said, we kind of go where we want to on certain days. We also take into account crowd calendars, which are really good to look at. I will link something down below, the crowd calendar that we tend to use. Take it all with a pinch of salt, because it's all kind of calculated based on information that is available to everyone to go and pull together. And we've had it in the past. In our November 2016 trip, I looked at a crowd calendar, ignored it, and actually we were fine for the majority of the trip. It really didn't affect us. So they're not always 100% accurate, but definitely take them into account as well. They can be a really useful planning tool, because the one that I use, it tells you the best park to go to on a certain day and the ones to definitely avoid on a certain day. So I find them really handy. Another thing to consider is if you are going to Disney World whilst there is a special event on, like Food and Wine Festival or Flower and Garden Festival, the Christmas parties, the Halloween parties, any of that stuff, or even Dapper Days and Run Disney events, the parks are going to be busier on during those times. My best advice for the festivals, and we experience this with Food and Wine Festival, is to avoid the park that is holding the special event on the weekends. So Food and Wine Festival, do not go on a Friday or a Saturday, because that's when all the locals go as well, so it gets extra busy. Dapper Day, if you're not taking part, the parks get absolutely chock-a-block, so it's sometimes worth avoiding it. And then another way we work on organising our trip and the days within the trip is by kind of working around our dining plans. Now this doesn't work for everyone, but we're massive foodies, so we always consider food a big part of our holiday. So what we try and do is look at the restaurants we want to book for our trip, or the restaurants we want to visit, and kind of plan our park days around those. So this year, on days that we're in Universal, what I've done is I've written the list of restaurants we want to visit, which we talked about in our last video. I'll link that below if you want to watch it. But I thought about the restaurants we want to go to, and I've kind of synced up the days. So on days we're in Universal, we really want to go to Bubba Gump's this year, so that's on City Walk, so it makes sense for us to go to Universal and Bubba Gump on the same day. If there's, you know, there's another night where we're going to Narcoossee's, which is at the Grand Floridian, and we've put that on a Magic Kingdom day because it's just across the water. So planning your park days around the restaurants that you've got booked, or the ones you want to visit, really helps. It's also a time saver as well. You don't want to have booked Bubba Gump on a day you're at Magic Kingdom and have to travel from one end of International Drive right to the other end. So that's a good way to logically plan your dining and park days around each other. So that is pretty much all the advice I have to offer on this. It's going to be a quick one today. Really conscious of the fact that we didn't have a video last week. We're super busy at the moment with just adulting and stuff like that. We're trying to get the house sorted because we only moved in last July. We're also we're looking after the dog. I've got a course coming up at work in a couple of weeks, like a qualification that I'm taking and an exam. So we definitely wanted to put a video out this week, but it's definitely been a bit of a struggle. So I do apologise as the video is a bit shorter. It might not be as useful as some of our previous ones might have been, but hopefully it's still enjoyable and you're able to take something away from it. So yeah, I really hope you've enjoyed this, and I will see you next week. And hopefully David will be back with me. Bye!